Welcome to the Diva Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Before we begin, a quick note. You may notice a little audio distortion in a few spots throughout this episode. We didn't catch it until we were in post-production, and since our guest won't be available to re-record for a while, we decided this conversation was simply too important to delay. Thanks for your understanding, and we think you'll find it's well worth the listen. Enjoy the episode. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are visiting with Russ Davis, who is the CEO and president of Perca, Inc., and they have a really unique way to treat wastewater. So welcome to the show, Russ.
Thanks for having me.
So when I first heard about this, the first question out of my mind, and it's going to lead into this, is you're treating wastewater with what? Did I hear that right? No. Ew. But, come on, we do have an ick factor in our industry, but this was like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And so without spoiling it, what we're going to be talking today about is about using worms, the little lowly, friendly little earthworm that many of us picked up as kids, and then some of us squashed on the sidewalk after a rain because it grossed us out. But Russ is not afraid of worms, and he likes worms, and they're using this now to treat wastewater. And immediately when I heard it, I thought it was a joke. I thought you were really kidding me. So what exactly, now you call it a worm bed system. So just kind of give us a worm treatment 101, and what is this exactly?
So again, thanks for having me on, Suzanne. I appreciate it. The idea behind Perca is we're essentially using what's called verma filtration. And verma filtration uses worms, verma being the word for worm, the Greek word. And the idea is to use worms to treat wastewater by giving them a habitat that allows the water to percolate through the system essentially and get treated as the worms address the solids, and their biology addresses a lot of the dissolved constituents as well. So yeah, it sounds kind of odd. It works very well, surprisingly, and a lot of people have the same response that you do, which is worms. It's kind of an odd way of looking at things, and most of us as kids fished with worms. Some people compost with worms. That's not an uncommon thing. But to treat water with worms is kind of a new way of looking at it. We call it the worm fuzzies, the way people like the idea of using worms to treat wastewater. And it sounds like a good and natural thing to do.
Yeah, I love it. And so, you said, to give us some context in your background and how this all came about, is you told me that you had, spent years, I guess, studying the subject of composting and getting involved with this technology. And so what was it that convinced you about this, that this just wasn't another interesting idea, and it was actually something that did have commercial application that could work?
Yeah, that was the key to the whole thing. So for about 25 years, I did mostly composting projects for large dairies around the Northwest, some municipal projects, anything that involved dairy manure possibly, or yard waste composting. I was involved in at some level, and we became a very large composter in the region. And when you go to a dairy, you see all the solids and the manure on the facility, and then you see these flat things at the ground level that are just full of water, and no one really sees the water because there could be a 25 million gallon lagoon, but what you see is the piles of solids. And so they're even smart, and it said to me one day, I realized that you're interested in the solids, but the water is going to be the thing that ultimately gets us. And so he was not incorrect. There are dairies in Washington State that have shut down because of nitrates in the groundwater.
But
And it got me to looking at, okay, what technologies exist out there that we could deploy that might be able to address not only nitrates, but other constituents. And there was just not really any good answers in standard technology. Anything that had to do with polymers or flocculants was just way too expensive because a lot of the dairy manure is high TSS. I mean, you're talking about
right.
4% solids sometimes. You just can't settle that out very well. So I looked into this technology using worms. There's about 2,000 studies around the world. I mean, all across the world, from India to Nigeria to China, where they've studied what can worms do to treat things on a small scale. And we tried kind of a larger scale test based on some relationships we built. The first one we did was here in Washington State, and ended up, as it's operating now, it's about a 7-acre worm bed up at a very large dairy in the center of Washington State. And the worms do their job. It's incredible. I mean, every time I come to work, I think to myself, this is really my job. I have to explain to people that I use worms to clean wastewater, but given the right circumstances, they absolutely can do the job.
That's really cool. I mean, now, what are some of the problems that you're seeing? I'm sure you realize this technology could do some of these things that they were having at the dairies, but what are some of the problems that you're seeing it can address as far as that maybe traditional treatment methods are struggling with it? Maybe they're doing it or they're failing, or if they are able to solve the problem, it takes an awful lot of effort or just doesn't quite get it to where they want to on a compliance level.
Yeah, this is excellent way of putting it. The whole reason PERC exists is when we realized there was an opportunity here, I wanted to kind of look and see what the industry was doing. And I'm not a wastewater engineer. I'm not even really a scientist. I'm just I'm a business opportunist who saw this need. And I mean, I've obviously spent enough time in organic materials that I understand what's happening, but I started looking at the other technologies out there and realized that as we've grown as a society, we've looked at places to go like landfills, and then we do water separation. We solids. We don't want to put those in the landfill, so we put them out in the fields. Over the course of time, that accumulates, and now we're finding PFAS and pharmaceuticals, and it's like every time we inject some sort of technology, it works, but it creates another problem downstream, and another problem downstream. And my theory was, right or wrong, I just felt like if we could stop just pushing things downstream and treat them at the source using natural systems, for example, these type of composting earthworms, it could totally change things. And so one of the first clients that we worked with was actually based here in Walla Walla, a large juice company who was having a problem of PCBs in their wastewater. And it was troublesome. The city kept getting them, and they were trying to get rid of them. And they brought these big companies to try to solve the problem. And it wasn't as if the standard wastewater technology wouldn't work. It was that it didn't work economically. It didn't work sustainably. It was going to end up in the landfill anyway. So without going too much into the details of that project, we were able to not only sequester those materials, but it looks like possibly break them down over time. And that's where we want to end up. Our goal is to put wastewater in a worm bed, treat it for some period of time, and at the end of that cycle, we harvest that material out of that bed, and it's worm compost, which goes into the field with zero contaminants, or not detectable levels of contaminants that can be used for growing good crops. And there's such a huge deficit of organic matter in the soil. I mean, some of the soils in the nation now are at 0.5% or less in organic matter, and that's going to come from compost and those type of products. But the worms really ratchet that up significantly because they add the biology that's necessary, not just the organic matter, which is something I always felt like we're kind of missing in the compost world. Is there's no engine. When you put compost into the field, it's a product, but when you introduce the worms, they're the engine behind the thing that keeps going. So it really is a progressive world, and there's so much that we've learned, and so much more to learn.
Wow. Because, when you started out, you were saying that, the market for doing things like this isn't just, the dairies or the juice factories, that, you saw that there was going to be something that this was going to help a lot of industries who were having problems with permit compliance to, be playing nice with their local community that's receiving their waste. But then there's municipal facilities that could benefit from something like this. And you actually have done an interesting project in a municipality, and they were dealing with very difficult waste streams. So I'd like you to share with the audience a little bit about what your experience has been as it applies in a municipal setting and the types of things that it could help a municipal facility.
One of the things we figured out almost right away was when you go to a municipal wastewater plant manager and say, we have the system that uses worms to treat wastewater, and like, we're never going to get that through. So
that's never going to get through city council. Go away.
Right. At least not at this stage. So what they've started doing is sending us to people. I don't want to use this term loosely, but they're troublemakers that are upstream, sending them high strength problems.
Okay.
And so what's happening, especially here locally and really everywhere we go, we'll talk to municipality and they'll say, this is great. You really should be talking to are these guys who are sending this high strength influence for this. And we're charging them significant amount of dollars for them to pay the penalties associated with these constituents. And so that is most of our work now is we'll talk to the city and say, hi, nice to meet you. Who are your problem children? And they say, oh, here's the list. And everybody usually wants to talk because the numbers are staggering. I have a client, a pending client, who's been paying something like $800,000 a year in water discharge and could accumulate costs. With a new high strength influent switchers, it would be close to $3 million a year. And they said, okay, wait a second. We have land for a worm bed. What can you lower it down to? Well, we're at 99% reduction in all the constituents that are causing problems for them. He said, I'll have a 2.5 year payback on this system. I don't know how I could not do it. He's going to do it through his folks upstream, which happens to also be a kind of a government project. But the numbers are just really leaning toward, instead of going to the city, go upstream to the producers who are sending the water to the city. Can we help them and save the city the headache of having to treat these high strand of influence?
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, is that if the city doesn't have to treat it, there is less burden on them, less wear and tear on their equipment and all the things that their operators have to do. So yeah, even though they're not the end consumer, like you're saying, who are your problem children? And so those who might be listening from cities, it's probably your industrial permit compliance officer that works with your industrial customers that really needs to be aware of this as a potential solution. And so, when these industrial customers are, comparing treatment technologies that they might have been looking at the past, and they're still, out of compliance, they're usually focused, as you just mentioned, on the performance and the ROI, the payback, or for them, it's going to be the bottom line. How is it going to affect them? But a lot of them are now concerned with, when you talk about sustainability and they've got these green initiatives, where does this sit as it relates to helping them with reducing energy consumption and their carbon footprint? Because I'm also thinking there's a lot of programs out there right now that if you're employing this, if you can monitor and collect that data, you have the potential of qualifying for carbon credits that even if you don't need them yourself, you can sell them onto the open market to somebody else who does need them. So where can this sit in that little pocket?
Yeah. Excellent point. The main thing that we pitch, we're talking about a worm bed, is methane reduction, right? So, and that converts into carbon credits, but it's not like making fuel. We're not doing fuel standard kind of things. But I'll tell you the thing that it's really generated a lot of interest, and I don't know how this is all going to go. We're going to know in the next few months. But we found out there are these companies, they're energy service providers who go out to these companies and say, well, you're spending $50,000 a month on this equipment. If you upgrade to this equipment, it will drop it down to $10,000 a month. Well, the utilities will subsidize the capital expense if you can show a significant savings. And we know based on history that we can lower energy costs on certain type applications by about 80 to 90%. So this one large winery project we're working on, they've got aerators in the lagoons, and they got evaporators at the end, and just all the maintenance that goes along with all those kind of things.
Right.
We'll be able to sell them a system that is, it'll obviously be capex upfront, but a lot of them capex will be paid for. A portion of it will be paid for by, in this case, Bonneville Power, through a series of uh, I don't know how you'd explain energy service companies kind of the subsidy program, but rebates. So by the end of it all, we should see some money back from them on that. Also, the EPA and local, state, in our case, the Department of Ecology, is making funds available for water reuse. And so what used to be an evaporative process for them of millions of gallons a year will now be stuck back into the watershed or groundwater. I mean, the story is so great. And on top of that, you have this issue of now we're aerating water. So there's no methane production at all while it's sitting there in the treatment process. The odor goes away. And so it's like 5-star deal. This odor goes away. There's no methane production. We're capturing water. Energy use goes down. And they're actually going to turn it into a place where they can bring people and say, hey, here's how we treat our water. And if I fix out the other ponds, once we clean those up, they'll need be clean water holding ponds. So yeah, the story is good. But I will tell you, as much as I love what we do and how great of a story it is, the one thing that is a challenge for us is land. We can't do this very well in downtown Seattle if there's no parking available, So we do take real estate. It's our the one thing that we can't really get around very well. It just takes square footage to treat water with a warm bed, because you have to let nature do its job, and you can't push it through like you can on a memory, right? So you have to let the worms do their job.
Right. So you need an area for the soil for the worms to move around. Could beds be built where, I'm just thinking out loud, where they could be modular, like almost making a high rise for the worms?
Yeah. So the only reason we haven't designed it yet, we have it on paper. There's so many people who don't need it stacked, who are just out. I mean, you were in Eastern Washington, there's a lot of rural municipalities who have land all around them, and industrial clients. So the only reason we got serious about it is because the clients have not beat us up about it yet. But the other thing to remember is at some point you got to harvest those beds. So we have to think about not only treating the water, but at some point in the future, how do we get that compost out of those beds and get new material back in the beds for the worms?
Yeah, there have to be a way, almost like those sliding drawers that you have in your kitchen, to get all the way back to that last spice on the back of the rack.
On our drawing board, we have a slide out design. Exactly right. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's one of the options for sure.
Yeah. So, you mentioned rural. So one of the things that I was thinking about, and we talked about this, is this could lend itself to areas globally where you don't have a lot of sophistication as far as, wastewater operators, because it would seem, from what I've seen, watched your videos and read your content, is that it's very simplistic in its design. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist as an operator to figure out how to use it, how to run it, how to keep it maintained. And you were saying, like harvest whatever it is out of the worm beds. And so for cities that don't have these large infrastructure budgets, they have land. How does this fit in for them? Because I'm thinking that this is an excellent fit for small communities, rural communities, industries that are out. You're working on a project right now at a winery. No, we can't talk about it yet, but for a winery, and we're all dealing with operator shortages. It's all over North America. Right. And so I just would like you to touch on the simplicity of this, because I see this as becoming a competitive advantage for you over some of the other traditional technologies that people have been using. But also to think, all right, yeah, you're used to this. It sounds funny. It sounds silly. But let's think about our community, our environment, our ecosystem, our people, the next generation of people coming in to take care of these systems, that maybe we really do need to take a closer look at how we plan and really be more open to these types of what I consider what you're doing a disruptive technology. You're thinking so far out of the box, but like you were saying, it's not just a win-win, it's a win-win-win-win-win all the way across the board. And so if you can touch on that a little bit as to, who are those ideal clients that could really benefit from something like this or looking at this?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on in the beginning when we were discussing labor and things like that, and the knowledge level required. Even though the worm technology is not, it sounds simple. The biological, the biome and the mat that's deconstructing these constituents down inside the bed, it's a little more complicated than we think. I mean, I think it's now is more of a clean tech firm almost than we were originally a wastewater treatment company.
Right.
And that's because we're finding out worms adapt over time. It appears that when they first come into contact with certain chemicals, they just sequester it. But as the generations continue, they start breaking these things down as it's just like microbes adapt, right? And worms adapt. It's very similar. And so once you start feeding them a type of substrate or a feedstock, they say, oh, now we're getting better and better and better at this. So the technology part of it is all happening inside the box, but the box essentially looks like a box with worms and wood shavings in it. The operational part of it is, I gotta admit, it's not super complicated, which is why our operation contracts are not very expensive. But one of the things you touched on, and it's absolutely true, is there's a shortage, as you know, of wastewater treatment operators everywhere you go.
Yep.
So one of the things we're working on now, I probably can let this out, it's a little early, but we're working on a new project. It's going to be a Vermatech Innovation Center on the Oregon coast. Now we have one in Walla Walla. Half our building is different types of worm species, different types of substrates. Right now, we're doing a trial on a product called stick water, which is a seafood very difficult seafood wastewater to treat. And so that's something we're learning about the next phase of treatment. But this idea at the coast is what we want to do is we've got this facility, it's already built. We're going to be able to move in to an existing facility and treat multiple streams and then blend streams to accommodate each stream's problematic issues. So if you have a stream that is high in salt, we have another stream that's low in salt, that's high in water. We can blend those two streams together, and there's two separate industries. And then we start ending up talking about things like industrial symbiosis. How can we take your waste and make it into something that we treat and turn it into a compost product that we put it onto a field to grow crops? So the goal is long term that we're doing this in cooperation with the community college. So if it all goes as we plan, they want to start setting a curriculum that incorporates Vermatech innovation type wastewater treatment, but also some standard wastewater treatment. And this new generation of youth, they love this idea of treatment options. But if you go to them and say, and not to disparage people who are in this space, but if you go to them and say, we got membranes and we got sequencing batch reactors, they're like, that just sounds like technology works. But we say to them, you can basically compost the water using nature, using biomimicry and biomimetics and create a product that's compost and grow organic crops. I mean, now they're like, okay, now I want to be part of that deal. So there's a little bit of this is storytelling, and a lot of it is we have to succeed in the projects that we're working on. So far, so good. I feel like this is disruptive. If we continue to do it at the rate we're going, it's going to be commonplace in another 20 years, and that's the goal.
So if we have this conversation, let's just say 5 years from now, where do you think that worm-based wastewater treatment is going to be sitting, and where do you foresee it's going to have the biggest impact?
So the learning curve is it's just a hockey stick. I mean, we can't go fast enough almost, So our patent, which was issued to us in February of this year, is specifically geared toward removing toxic constituents and all the other constituents, but kind of with a focus on things like de-icer from airplanes or polyacrylamides or things you're trying to get rid of out of a wastewater that have normally been kind of the standard operating procedure. Things like PCBs, PFAS, PFOAs. We're looking at studying all of those things. Now, in our case, unlike most technologies, you run it through something is finished when it gets to the other side. In our case, it takes some time to break those things down. Which also means that it takes some time to learn how long it takes to break those things down.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So in 5 years from now, I feel like there'll be a lot more worm beds in the world tackling large problems that are simple to solve. Behind that, though, we'll start getting into more of the technical issues like landfill leachates, and we've already done some testing on landfill leachates, and I've had some success with them. The worms are robust, and they're able to take just about anything you send them, as long as you don't burn them or dry them up or over or drown them. You can generally make it so that they can be toasted at a rate that we can accomplish some good work. So we're talking to multiple locations across the nation who got technology issues, and they're trying to figure out, we're doing 500,000 gallons a day, but wait, we're using ponds. So are you saying that we stop using ponds, maybe we'll get the energy credit from the utility provider to help us pay and clean up our wastewater treatment? And the answer is yeah. So there's a lot of activity. I will tell you that probably in the next 6 months or so, our ability to grow will change a lot. We're having really good conversations with people who are interested in being in the space with us. So we'll see what happens, and I'm looking forward to what happens for the next few months.
Yeah, because I think, you brought up something that there's a lot of misconceptions about nature-based treatment solutions. Is that what is our first answer? Let's throw more machinery or more chemical at it. And, when we think about this planet, I'm a firm believer that everything that we need to solve problems, most of it, was placed here for our use. We just have to find it. And it's not going to be man-made in a lab.
Yes. Yeah. History tells us that if we make mistakes and leave them alone, nature usually will clean them up. So instead of waiting for things to happen on accident, we're just kind of going after on purpose. And so the goal is not only to do verma filtration, but also to look at things like, what about mycelium or a mushroom type activity alongside? Because mushrooms have the ability to sequester other certain things. What about using, instead of wood shavings, what if we use other types of substrates that have a much more serious carbon sequestration capacity? What about other worms? We already know there's worms out there that can process waste up to 4 times the speed of the ones we're currently using. The problem is some species are considered invasive. And so we have to run tests and get allowances. And it takes a while. But the good news is we have our chief science officer is one of those kind of guys who's named worm species. And so he's actually involved with us on a daily basis, trying to help us make sure we're going down the right road on which worms we pick.
That's excellent. So this is fascinating. I think this is just really cool, as to use something that Mother Nature has provided to solve a critical issue. Industry as well as municipal, eventually municipal. And, it's just, thank you for bringing it to the forefront. And it may sound crazy, but it actually works. And so for those who are listening that would like to learn more about what Perca is doing, or to get in touch with you to learn more, possibly pilots or visit a site where this is taking place to see it firsthand, what's the best way to learn more and get in touch with you, Russ?
Yeah, thanks. Always the best way is to go to perca.net on the internet. It's for fun. We look at perca.com and we thought, wait, fish, Perca, perch is kind of the fish that we use in a lot of our load. We thought fish and net, they kind of go together. So we went perca.net. So
very clever. Okay.
Perca.net, and you can see our videos and things we've been doing. There's videos. We have one with the city of Wall where they talk about how the worm bed has impacted our business there. We've done the seafood stuff is on there. It's probably the best place to go. And I'm absolutely interested in talking to anyone who's got a curiosity about worm beds. There's a lot happening, and everything's on the table right now.
All right. Well, Russ's contact information and LinkedIn profile will be in the show notes, as well as the website address, so you can get more information. And Russ, thank you again for coming on the show and talking about the creepy crawlies. And thank you. Yeah. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.